All right, all right. We just got done with episode number 2. Another great episode by Brad Harker. Let's move right into the Q&A section. You guys still have time to send in a few questions via this chat box here that we're using, or again by Twitter or Facebook. But Brad, let's get going.
Great, sounds good.
So, question number 1: in the example you gave, is there a reason you let's see, I can't read. You started your pitch asking 5 questions.
Yes, that's a good find. I wish I would have taken some time to talk about that. I discovered this technique called question-based selling. And it's actually a really good example of a pattern interrupt in and of itself. By asking 5 questions as opposed to introducing myself, as we were talking about the elevator pitch, leading with 5 questions had a really interesting effect. It actually made the customer feel like they were qualifying for something. Obviously, you get to the power of your question starts to diminish as the customer gets annoyed having to ask so many questions. But 5 relevant questions that really didn't make sense to the customer at first was a really powerful way to break those walls down and be that pattern interrupt. What was also interesting is I always made sure the answers to those questions was a yes. And if you've read the book or heard of the book, Getting to Yes, we call that a yes set. And the more times you can get the customer to say yes, and you build that positive interaction as opposed to questions that evoke a no answer, it's so much more effective. So that was a great way for me to use a pattern interrupt. And going back to that topic, pattern interrupts there's so many different variations to them. The goal is to be creative. The goal is to remain authentic. And the purpose is to find ways to break through and be authentic so your customer is disarmed and engaged by what you're doing. Questions are always a great way to do that. I usually coach most of my sales clients and employees to focus on good questions early that establish that rapport and break down those barriers.
Love it. Next question. I like the idea of starting to become an expert. Any suggestions to getting started?
Okay, good question. So I was introduced to Haro, H-A-R-O. If you go online and search for it, it's really not that elaborate of a system outside of them sending you emails. But the first step that I would do is let's say you're a business owner or an entrepreneur, the first thing I would ask is what is your niche? What do you want to be known as an expert in? And get clear on that. And that will allow you to target your message. Think of your customers, when you focus on your target audience, think of your customers as communities. And typically we organize ourselves in clusters. So people that have like interests will typically gravitate to the same forums, the same websites. So as an expert, if you want to be from an entrepreneurial perspective, what is your message? Think about that. What do you want to be known as an expert in? And start there, and then look for some of those forums to publish content. Write blog posts, go to existing forums, and just comment on some of the blog posts and some of the articles that you read. From a sales standpoint, what are the communities or where are your customers hanging out? And become an expert in those spaces. As they start to see you, your comments, your relevant information, applying to what it is that your product or service offers, that's a great way to go into somebody else's community and start to attract and create value for your customers and bring them to you.
Great. Next question. What are some tips to discover hot buttons during the sales process?
Okay, this is fun. I used to play a game when I was in B2B sales, any sort of a direct contact selling. This was a lot of fun. We would play a game and it was guess who's going to answer the door, or guess who's going to be in the office. So we'd look for cues, and if we were outside knocking on somebody's door at their house, we'd look at the yard. We'd look for any sort of toys, bikes, anything. Like my house right now is going to be littered with bikes all over the place, and so anybody walking up to my house would know for sure that I have small children, and you can immediately start adapting your pitch based on the fact that you know that there's going to be somebody with children. So if I was selling a home security system, for example, I would definitely, before I've even seen the customer, I'm going to start thinking of hot buttons, value that's going to be based on what's going to be useful for kids or for a parent that's concerned about their kids. When you're on the phone, it's a little bit tougher. And it's important for you to draw as many conclusions as you can from the information that you have. I always encourage you to look at the title, look at the name of the person. If you know what the location of the company is, let's say that it's football season right now, and if you're talking to somebody in Alabama, you can always reach out to their football team. Everybody in Alabama loves their football team. So if you get creative and you try and figure out as much information as you can about the customer, you can start to draw conclusions and leverage those to kind of venture into some hot button territory. When you get into somebody's office in person, and as you build those conversations, great questions allow you to really get to understand what's valuable, what they're interested in, and that's a really important way to build and start to leverage those hot buttons.
Another question. When prospecting, is it better to qualify first or build rapport before a pitch?
Great question. I think that depends a lot on the industry. If you're in an industry where you've got a lot of customers that may have a difficult time qualifying or being eligible for a product, I would probably lead with the qualifying. That's probably where I'd really lead with the question-based selling, because it allows you to still interrupt the pattern, allows you to still start building that rapport, but you can ask those qualifying questions. I don't think it's ever bad to throw the question, are you the person, if you're talking to a business, leading in probably one of the first 2 or 3 questions, to lead with the question, are you the person that's responsible for this in your particular company? That's never a bad question, and if you get a no answer, obviously you're talking to the wrong person. If you get them to say yes, you've qualified them, but that's also built rapport, because now they feel special, because yes, I am the person, I am the boss. And so qualifying and that specific question is a great one to use early in the sale.
Next question. I'd like to become more assumptive. What are some of the things I can do to practice or develop the ability to be assumptive?
Cool. I like that question. That could be a really long answer. So I think the first thing is let's talk about goals. What are you being assumptive for? Let's start at the high level. Being assumptive is seeing a future or an objective and committing to it. And when you think about it, it's dispelling all of those thoughts like, I can't do that, or that's really difficult, or there's no way that I have the opportunity, or I could possibly do that. It's getting rid of those thoughts and telling yourself that you can. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is the most powerful 3 letters, ASK, ask. Start asking for what you want. Now, that can be directly to somebody that you're interacting with. I've got a great friend, I'll give you a really quick example. He's never paid full price for a pair of shoes. Now, I don't know where he thought of that, because I know he pays full price for a lot of other things, but he's just somehow decided in his life that he didn't want to pay full price for a pair of shoes. So he could be at a golf pro shop, or he could be at Foot Locker, and he will ask the rep, the salesman, for a discount every single time, and he gets a discount every single time. It's fascinating. I don't know if I have the gumption to do that, but I do find there's a lot of places where I go where I don't barter everywhere I go, but I do always ask. I'm always interested in finding, a shortcut, or finding a better way to get something, a cheaper way. And that was a really good example of just asking. And what's really cool is you can do the same for life. You can ask life for things. If you have a belief in God, you ask God. Whatever you do, you see what you want as the end goal, and you ask life, or you ask those around you to help you get that. Being assumptive will force you to become as creative as you possibly can, and as resourceful as possible to get what you want. And so the best way to start is to decide what you want and start asking life for it, asking yourself to believe that you can have it, asking those around you to get around you to support you. And asking is a powerful thing that I don't think we do enough of.
Okay, next question. From a management position, how can I use matching and mirroring to communicate with my team, and how much can it help me?
Okay, really good question. I think what's important to remember is that rapport is integral regardless of the interaction. I see rapport not as just a sales strategy, but as a communication strategy. So when it comes to, and why would that be relevant as a manager working with your employees? Well, if let's say that you are coaching them on a difficult topic or something that they need some work on, getting in rapport with them first is going to allow them to resonate with you and kind of connect with you. And when you're connected, you have it's so much easier and it's so much more natural to communicate. You get on that same wavelength. And one of the things that you commonly see when you get in rapport with somebody is you can almost finish each other's thoughts. You kind of know exactly what they're going to say. Even with my wife, sometimes we will have a discussion, we'll be talking about an issue, and it's before we've gotten into rapport. It's so important to get in rapport and then discuss and then work through some of those things. So rapport is really critical, especially as a manager. The more powerful, or the more you're able to get in rapport with your staff, with those that you are leading, the more they'll be able to follow you naturally and organically.
Great. Next question. Can the way I ask questions build rapport while determining key qualifying points?
Can the way I ask questions build rapport while determining key qualifying points? Okay, so what you're asking is, can I still ask questions that move the sale along and build rapport? I think so. And in the next section, I'm glad you brought that up, we are going to talk about more of the presentation. And by nature of that, we're going to talk about some of the great questions that we can use to discover the needs of our customer. And we're also going to talk about great value statements that we can use to create that value for them. So absolutely. And I think the most some of the biggest problems that we face can typically be solved by asking different questions. If we want to change our outcome, we need to ask different questions. We need to change our way of thinking. And so when it comes to the sales process, leading and building rapport with our customers, come up with great questions that help you see that the answer is going to move you along in the sale, and questions that are going to help you obviously establish that rapport. So I think the answer absolutely is yes. That's a great question.
Do you want to do this one here?
Pattern interrupt for phone sales. Is it as effective, or do you need to get I see what you're saying. Okay, so are pattern interrupts as effective in phone selling? Yes, I think that they are. In the same way that when we go back to the communication breakdown, we talk about the different elements of communication. Obviously, when you're on the phone with somebody, you lack some of that face-to-face body language that you would be able to draw from. Their eye patterns, their hand gestures, their body movement. But you adapt, and you can start to gain rapport based on the information that you have. And I absolutely believe that a pattern interrupt is just as effective on a call. It may not be quite as elaborate because you're not in their presence, but I think there's some great questions that you can ask that will help maybe throw them off. A joke, maybe something funny that's maybe unexpected to the customer but not overwhelming can be a good pattern interrupt. And I think it's really important. Look at some of the calls and try different things. You can't go too wrong, especially if you're in phone sales. Play around, have fun with your customers, and see what are some of the things you can do that really help get that rapport established and break those walls down quick. It's amazing how clear it is. You can tell when you've got the rapport, even on the phone, and when they finally connect with you. So try a few things. I think it's as effective. Maybe we lack some of the intensity of it, but I still think it's a powerful technique.
Great. Well, it looks like some of these other questions are things that you're going to be covering on episode 3 and 4. So I'm thinking we'll just kind of wait on those for you to answer them. But anyway, again, thanks for being on here. We will see you again next week, same time, same place, for episode number 3. Again, if you have any questions, any other questions about the webinar or anything else that we're doing, feel free to reach out to us. bradharker.com or outliermagazine.co. We would be more than happy to connect with you and talk to you, and also connect with us on Facebook. We have some links here on the chat box that you can connect to, and we're looking forward to continue to grow this this webinar series and putting out more information. So again, thanks. Brad, anything you want to add?
No, I appreciate you being here. Looking forward to next week. Reach out to me during the week if you have any questions, or if there's anything you feel like we've missed with regard to prospecting and getting into that initial pitch. We'll pick up on that as we get into the next sections, but please reach out to me with any questions or anything that you want me to elaborate on or expound on. And with that said, thank you so much for being here tonight. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to talking to you next week.